I think there always is going to be this, pass our tax or else kind of messaging. And we're seeing the graduated tax, the progressive tax initiative come back now. Right. It's never truly dead, I guess. But the governor has signaled support for it. Many legislators have signaled support for it. And I think it's interesting. In order to implement a progressive tax, you have to get voter approval, right? You have to amend the Constitution in order to do that. And so, luckily for Illinois taxpayers, it can be one of those things that on the very last day of session, they just sneak into a bill in order to pay for all their additional spending. But they could, in this legislative session, they could pass an initiative, a resolution, to put that question back on the ballot in one form or another. And I think we're going to have to pay pretty close attention to what that looks like, because there are a number of Democratic legislators who think we don't have near enough money to spend on all the things we want to spend on. And the only place we can go for it is to come back to taxpayers and ask them for more.
When they say we don't have enough to spend, what does more spending mean? Like, what does more government spending equate to?
I mean, it would certainly equate in many of the core areas of state spending to just additional dollars outlaid by the state. So one of our largest areas of spending is K-12 education. There's a proposal, some lawmakers are talking $1 billion a year extra right now. There are some who are saying we're $5 billion a year short in K-12 education. And so, even for something that, a lot of people want to have good quality education, there's this wild discrepancy in how much it's going to cost to do that. Some people would say, I'll throw an additional $5 billion at it. Others who would say, we're going to use that additional spending to do more programs, to create new programs, to provide new services, to add additional benefits, to give people more in Medicaid, or give people more in SNAP or food assistance programs, or give out new grants to community organizations doing any number of things across the state. There's an endless appetite for additional spending, and what it means for each legislator might look a little different, but trust me, there's no shortage of new ideas.
One thing we saw in Chicago this year was aldermen flat out rejected Brandon Johnson's wealth tax. They kind of drew a line in the sand saying, we have to protect business interests. And it was interesting to see that in Chicago, because it feels like they've learned a lesson that Springfield lawmakers are still grappling with, where the default in Springfield seems to be going to taxing businesses. How do Springfield lawmakers start to learn that lesson?
I think it's a question of sort of how bad does it need to get before they wake up to the impact of this. We talk a lot about how does Illinois compare to other states, because it's a very valid question of, if somebody's going to make a new investment, some private business is going to come and build a new factory in Illinois, or build a new office in Illinois, and they're going to hire hundreds or thousands of people, and they're going to make a capital investment that's a generational commitment to being in a state. They're going to think long and hard about, what's the tax policy look like here? What does the liability policy look like here? What's the workforce look like here? What's housing availability? All these kind of things are going into that area. But taxes are pretty easy to compare, because you can just look at a rate here and a rate here. You can have your accountants make a comparison of, what would it cost me every year to have this location in Texas? What would it cost me to have it in Illinois? I think aldermen in Chicago are acutely aware of that, because Chicago is one of the top tier of cities where you're not competing against every little town across the country. You're really kind of in this tier where you say, all right, I have maybe 4 or 5 options of where I could go to make a signature investment like this. Chicago's on that list in a lot of cases. But we've seen people leave the city of Chicago, relocate headquarters to other locations. People haven't grown their facilities here. And so I think aldermen have started to say, well, look, we really need to address the fact that when it comes to stacking Chicago up against other cities, we're not coming out on the winning end of these things. The same is true of Illinois. There's a different competitive landscape as you broaden, from the city to the entire state. But lawmakers in Springfield really have to think around, if somebody is making a decision about whether to locate anywhere in Illinois, right, a small town, mid-sized town, the suburbs, the city, whatever it could be, they're stacking that up against someplace else. And so hopefully at some point they say, It's not a good look for us to have the highest property taxes in America. This is causing us to lose opportunities. It's not a good look to have the third highest corporate income taxes in America. It's not a good look for us to every single year make all these arcane tax policy changes that take hundreds of millions of dollars more from businesses that are, stuck here in some way. They have to wake up to that competitive dynamic. And that's going to be when they say, look, enough is enough. We can't jeopardize going any further in this because we can't jeopardize losing another major employer or missing out on another major investment.
It's almost like these companies are looking at their own budget and balance sheet and, taxes expense that they have to pay. So if you can make a decision to lower expense, that could increase your revenue.
It absolutely could. And, it's not the only thing they're looking at. There's a lot of dynamics that go into place for these. But again, it's very easy to quantify what that's going to be. And so if maybe you're on the fence and you're sort of stuck between two locations, if you're going to pay, half price someplace else, that looks like a pretty good deal.
And businesses are important because, as you pointed out, they're one of the major contributors to the revenue that the state uses.
Directly through corporate income tax, but more importantly, through all of their employees, all of those people who are bringing home a salary, who are paying a tax, who are buying food at the grocery store, who are investing in a house, all of those kind of things that contribute to a dynamic economy. It's very interconnected with what's your job market look like, and the job market relies on corporate decision makers.